That sounds really odd. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we are going to be doing a reading vlog for Women's Empowerment Day. Before we get into anything bookish, however, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what is a book you're reading this month with some feminist themes. I can always use more recommendations. Alright, so this is a little bit of a different layout. I've never filmed from this position at this height before, but you know, I just wasn't really feeling filming in front of my bookshelves today. I wanted to change things up a little bit. Thus, here we are. So, continuing my trend of celebrating Women's Empowerment Day with a reading vlog, I will once again be reverting to my original plan where I will have a nonfiction book and a fiction book. I didn't do that last year, but I feel like it makes more sense to do that, so I have a little bit of a change up between the two books. For my nonfiction read, I'm going to be going with 𝗖cie and Other Essays by Tressie mcmillan cottom. I'm actually already a little bit into this, but I'm not going to give an update quite yet. On the opposite side, I'm going to be reading 𝗖temnestra by costanza casati. I picked this book for the reading vlog because not only do I have a arc that I need to get read for it, but also I saw that this is being marketed as very similar to Madeline Miller's 𝗖cie, which also had some very strong feminist themes going on there. I think this one will be pretty interesting because Clytemnestra is a character who is often described in a very villainous way, so that's going to be a little different, but it also hits very similar to 𝗖cie, and I'm really intrigued to see how casati humanizes this character a little bit more and then hopefully plays into the feminist areas that are available to her with this sort of a retelling. I say that because I'm coming off of another Greek retelling book that was supposed to have feminist themes but did not, and I'm still bitter about it. Anyway, so that's my plans for this reading vlog. Hopefully that'll go well. So as I was saying with 𝗖cie, I actually am already at page 60. So I've read the first and about half of the second essay, and I am already really enjoying this. Enjoy is a weird word to use here. It's a very thought-provoking book thus far. From the first chapter, I knew I was going to really enjoy the author's writing style because I appreciate the fact that she actually takes the time to explain why these topics she's discussing are important and what they mean to her as well, so that makes me automatically more invested in what she has to say. On one hand, her writing does feel very relaxed, it flows very seamlessly, but on the opposite side, it still feels pretty academic and complex, which makes sense because the author is actually a sociology professor. I think that's a hard balance to manage, but she's done it and at the same time has managed to convey the passion she has for these topics. The one thing that definitely impressed me though, and really showcased that I was going to enjoy her style, her utilization of an extended metaphor in the first essay. It's kind of hard to see, but already I have had a few tabs, and these are just quotes or lines that I found very moving, but I also have a few at the back that are also very hard to see, but those are on her references, and I actually want to check those out and read more about them. I do like that she has utilized references in her writing. Not only does it back up her own points, but at the same time it allows the reader an opportunity to do more investigating into those topics. Speaking of topics, this is a collection of essays, discussions of self and your place in society with different ties to obviously feminism, seeing as how I'm reading it for this video, but also she has some connections with that to racism, classism. Beauty standards have come up in the second essay that I'm currently in the middle of. Even though I haven't finished out the second essay yet, this author has already made me have to sit back and rethink my perspective, specifically around racism and beauty standards. That's a portion of intersectional feminism that I will be honest, I've never really thought too deeply about, but almost immediately I understood and could actually see in my mind what she was talking about. And with that, I already want to know more, which is why I have tabs to go and look up some of the references she utilized. I've talked about before how my thesis in college revolved around body image and then privilege, particularly their utilization in advertising and the effects that has on young women's mental health. I never considered looking at it from a racial standpoint, and I'm now absolutely fascinated by this and want to do some more research into it. I'll admit, when I was doing my research, obviously my perspective was that of a white woman, so I never considered how race could play into those results. now I'm fascinated and I need to know more. In that same vein, the author actually calls out a book, The Beauty Myth, which I actually have on my own TBR. I just saw it at a Half Price Books and picked it up, had never heard of it. The author talks about the total lack of intersectionality between race and beauty standards within that book, but I like the fact that I know some criticism of the book going into it to be able to pinpoint different biases and blind spots that the author didn't cover. Yeah, like I said, thus far this has been a very thought-provoking book and I'm really enjoying it. It's not very long, so I probably will work through it fairly quickly. The margins are really big and the space between lines is quite big, so I will try to talk to y'all again before I get too far into it, but I'm not going to guarantee anything.
Good morning. Yes, it is morning because lately I have been reading like 80 pages in the morning and I already read 2 more essays last night, so I was like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna be good and I'm actually gonna give another update. But I'm not awake yet, so it's gonna be pretty subdued. As I was saying, I got 2 more chapters into thick last night, and I'm really impressed with the way the author interweaves her personal anecdotes with her references, and then eventually really dives into the meat of her theory that she has, specifically with the last 2 chapters. The first one had a focus on medical racism, and the second was talking about the transition from the Obama presidency to Trump being elected. I think it's absolutely awful that this poor woman had to experience these things, but I think what's even more awful is the discussion around why those things are happening and the fact that they are continuing to happen because of social stigmas and historical biases. It's sad and disgusting, and you would think people who have gone through that much schooling would know better. And then at the same time, I also praise the author for the fact that she is not afraid to make her readers uncomfortable, and I think that's an important feeling to have as a nonfiction reader, particularly if you're not the target audience, because it makes you think about what she is saying and why does it make you uncomfortable. It's the perfect opportunity for a jumping off point to do your own research and explore your own feelings on this situation. While each essay themselves is not that long, I mean, this book itself is not thick, the discussions that are being talked about are. So far, I would say that the writing has become a little bit more analytical and not research paper complex, but it's definitely getting higher up there. I am having to pay more attention to the words she's utilizing and think more about what she's saying. With the last 2 essays, although they're interesting, neither of them were topics that I am unfamiliar with. I've read stuff about them before, so they weren't as thought-provoking to me. I mean, they're still very interesting to read about. Overall, I'm still really enjoying this book. I have 4 essays left, so if I keep with the trend I've been having, probably have to update y'all again this afternoon.
So I just realized that apparently I actually was wearing this shirt in a previous update for this video. I just find it very amusing because it usually takes me a very long time to work through all of my t-shirts. Anyway, hey y'all, so I have officially finished out Thick and Other Essays. Overall, I did enjoy this. I talked about earlier how my favorite essay at the beginning that really had me thinking was the In the Name of Beauty one. That one was sort of expanded upon later on with the essay Fabulousness. However, Fabulousness was looking at it in more of a fashion standpoint compared to In the Name of Beauty, which was more looking at obviously like natural beauty and beauty standards. Both of those things definitely go hand in hand. I thought it was presented and handled in a clever way, even if it wasn't a topic that was brand new to me. That sort of topic obviously leads into some discussions of classism and poverty, which I really enjoyed the way she utilized her personal anecdotes from her life, especially how she saw her mother presenting herself whenever they would go out places, the fact that her mom would put so much thought into her appearance and how other people reacted to her because of that. I actually remember that being a topic of discussion in a business class that I had to attend in college, because fashion presentation is not something I directly will tie in with like classism or racism, but it's definitely something that is an important topic, particularly in the job market. But again, I just felt like the author presented that topic very well. However, like I said, that wasn't a new topic to me, and that did sort of become a ongoing theme for the rest of the book. Many of the other essays that I was reading later on weren't anything new. I was still definitely moved by Dying to Be Competent, which was discussing medical racism, as well as Black Girlhood Interrupted, which discussed how Black women are so often discarded when there's any question in regards to their value. Both are absolutely disgusting realities that have unfortunately been proven time and time again in research, but I didn't really feel like the author presented anything new on the topic. I did appreciate that in the latter essay I mentioned, she brought up different big name celebrities such as R. Kelly or Charlemagne the God. She was able to utilize them as examples for her discussion while also addressing the toxic thought processes around not trying to tear these men down for the terrible things they've done, because they're Black men who have made it up into the big leagues, but that doesn't absolve them of the way they treat Black women in their lives. Unfortunately though, this ended on sort of a low note for me. I really wasn't a fan of the last essay. It kind of just read like a rant. I think it was an interesting topic in regards to discussions on racism and classism in the publishing industry, but I wasn't crazy about how it was presented and how she wrote about it. Some of the evidence utilized also just didn't feel like it tied into the main point she was trying to make. Because of that, this sort of ended on a low note, which is really a shame because I started this book really enjoying it. Obviously, I can't really do a pile breakdown with nonfiction books, but I do sort of have my own rating system with them, and this came down to about a 4-star. I did enjoy it, but I do think this is a good book to pick up if you want to look at topics of feminism that are a little bit quieter or don't get nearly as much attention. Though I could see the writing style, which comes across as academic at times, detracting from some people's enjoyment of the book, but overall I do think this was a thought-provoking read and I would recommend it. Okay, so that is it for now. I will talk to you guys again whenever I pick up the next book for this video, Clytemnestra. Hey y'all, so I have officially started into Clytemnestra, my fiction book for this reading vlog, and already I'm enjoying it so much more than the last Greek retelling I had been reading. Both of them are definitely sold as feminist retellings, but I actually feel like this is a feminist story in comparison to the previous one. So that's why I'm already talking to you when I am barely 10% in. From the get-go, this book has absolutely fantastic atmosphere. I definitely feel like I am transported back to Greece, sun beating down, a nice crisp breeze going by, surrounded by all of this beautiful architecture and artwork, olive trees everywhere as far as the eye can see. I just really feel like I am in Greece while I'm reading this. I'm very impressed with the author's writing in that regard already. On top of that, I wasn't really sure what to expect going into this book, where we were going to start with Clytemnestra's story, because in my experience, I feel like most often I'm hearing about her story as it relates to Agamemnon. No, that's not the case here. We start with her as a child, and already I am definitely enjoying her. Seeing as how she is a Spartan, she is actually trained to fight from a pretty young age, and she's pretty cutthroat. She's pretty ruthless. I also love the sisterly bond we're seeing between her and Helen, because Helen is another character that can often be vilified for her role in the Trojan War. So I really appreciate that, since Clytemnestra is often in the same boat. That's really all I have to say right now. I'm just impressed with the writing, and I like the fact that Clytemnestra actually feels like a feminist character. She does feel like a strong woman whose entire existence is not revolving around the men in her life. She is trying to uplift the other women around her, namely Helen. So I like that, since, like I said, the last Greek retelling I read did not go this well. Hey y'all, so I am just shy of the halfway point in Clytemnestra, and I am still enjoying this. It's strangely slow while also moving quite quickly. I must say, I adore the number of sisterly relationships we are seeing. We have Clytemnestra and Helen. We see a little bit of those two alongside their cousin Penelope. Then we see more of Timandra, Clytemnestra's younger sister, as the book goes on. And I was surprised to see that the author slid in some representation with Timandra, seeing as how she is absolutely head over heels in love for a girl in her fighting circle. She actually likens herself to Achilles at one point, which I found very hilarious. I must say, I'm really impressed with the fact that this book does not shy away from the brutality of the Spartans, whether male or female. Clytemnestra is a vicious fighter, and even once she gets pregnant, it doesn't dim her character. She still has a brutal personality. She doesn't become a purely maternal figure, which I do find very refreshing, but at the same time, we do see some interesting discussions around a maternal identity in Clytemnestra's mother, Leda. We finally see a little bit of depth from her when we start to understand that although she puts on this facade of being the happy queen, of having so much power, she really is just as voiceless as anyone else. She constantly has to defer to her husband. That's definitely something that she is struggling with more and more as the book continues, because he is becoming worse and worse. I don't want to spoil anything, but at the same time, it's also really weird to talk about spoilers in regards to a book around mythology. The dynamics between the men and women in the society become even more prevalent with the introduction of Agamemnon. Doesn't matter what book it is, he is always the absolute worst. But I do think Casati has characterized him perfectly, because he is so unsettling. He just takes up the entire page with his presence. I would take the stairs before being in an elevator alone with this man. Before Clytemnestra ever actually suffers from his hand, she still isn't afraid to speak up against him, to protect those lower than her, even to protect somebody she doesn't particularly like at one point, because she knows that what he does is not right. Holy hell though. When this takes a dark turn, it takes a dark turn. When we get some depth into Helen's character, her kidnapping by Theseus, holy shit, you really see how even though the Spartans seem like they are such a feminist society by training their women to fight, at the same time, they're just as awful as every other patriarchal society at this time. Theseus gets away with kidnapping and raping Helen because he's a hero, and that's his right. All of that though, it only darkens whenever Helen ends up marrying Menelaus. I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but Agamemnon's brother. From that point onward for quite some time, it's just dark. It's just depressing. It's a rough read, and I'll admit, I definitely had a moment where I really, if I wasn't reading on my phone, I would have thrown my phone across the room. But with what happens there, Clytemnestra never loses her fighting spirit. Even though she's so vicious, she still separates herself from Agamemnon because she isn't cruel. She's brutal, but she's never evil. By this point, she is literally just sustaining herself with revenge. She is going to have vengeance no matter how long it takes. In fact, not long ago, I just passed a 15-year time jump. On one hand, definitely caught me off guard, but also makes perfect sense for how we're ever going to lay out all of the other stories that connect to her. It does make the shift in her personality more startling, but whenever we get to see a little bit of the original Clytemnestra, it just reinforces that she is surviving to find vengeance. It's so good. That one scene we got was so satisfying, and it makes me so much more excited for what is going to come with Agamemnon. Oh, I can't wait. I cannot decide if I like these little birds or not. They sounded like a good idea when I first put them in, and now I'm not sure if I actually like it. Oh well, we're just gonna stick with it. Hey guys, so I officially finished out Clytemnestra. I meant to update y'all one more time before I finished this book, but it's been a really crazy week. And then today I was just like, you know, I want to finish this book. I am so invested. I'm really enthralled with what has been happening, especially once we get like kind of a romance. Like there's sort of a romance, but it's sort of not. Like it's definitely not the focus. I wouldn't say I was super invested in their relationship. Once that's introduced as a possibility, I was really interested to see what was going to come of it, how it was going to play out, what Casati would change. So because of that, any free time I had today, I just dedicated to reading and read like the last 20%. That rage, that determination that I talked about in my last update, oh, it just grows all the more in the rest of the book. You can feel Clytemnestra's hate towards Agamemnon. You can feel the coldness in her personality now that something has happened, because we finally get into the Trojan War. At the beginning of it, there's an event that occurs, which I knew was coming. I knew that was going to happen, and yet I had still grown to care about that character, especially through their relationship with Clytemnestra, that whenever I hit that scene, it was still heartbreaking. It was still very difficult to read. And then after that, there's a 9-year time jump. And that final time jump, oh, like all of that resentment has just been consistent
for so long, but it is sweetened by the fact that Agamemnon has been gone for almost 10 years, and Clytemnestra has been ruling by herself and doing a better job of it than Agamemnon ever did. Oh, that just tastes so sweet. She really throws her all into being the queen, and with that, I adored the way Casati would bring up the parallels between the two of them and the differing reactions they received. They would rule in very similar ways. Any action she would take would definitely be something Agamemnon would do. He would have been considered a great ruler for doing that, and she is considered cold and calculating and devious, losing her mind for doing something like that. But guys, when he comes back and she finally gets to act on her revenge, oh, so good. It was so satisfying. I was on the edge of my seat during that scene when she finally does it, and then the way she owns it afterwards, it's beautiful. It's so good. It's so good. And the parallels between her avenging her daughter in comparison to a son having to avenge his father in the society, beautiful. Beautiful. So good. Again, it's really weird to talk about mythology retellings because it feels like what I'm about to say is spoilers, but like that's literally the myth. Of course, with Clytemnestra killing Agamemnon, obviously that is going to lead to the next issue in that family with Electra, her daughter, starting to hate her. We do see her relationship with Electra, and it definitely is a little tumultuous, but I just wasn't quite convinced by Electra's hatred for her mother. There's like throwaway lines here and there to explain it, and we do see that Clytemnestra does treat her daughter differently, but that's also because her daughter's personality is just so different from the rest of her children. I just wanted more from them. I wanted to see more of their relationship actually on page. With that, I do think it's very interesting where Casati chose to end the book, because like I was just talking about, there's another major element to the story that occurs, but Casati doesn't cover it in this book. So because of it, the ending of this book is almost a happy ending. It's as happy as it can be for Clytemnestra. On one hand, I enjoy because by this point in the book, I have spent so much time growing to care about her and wanting her to get her revenge. I'm glad it ends on a positive note because I can be happy for her. But on the other hand, knowledge is not a great thing here because I know the rest of the myth, and I know something else will probably happen after the fact, and I'm not happy about that. Anyway, across the board, this book was really fantastic. The writing was just beautiful. It was so stunning. The atmosphere was strong throughout the entire story. The character creation, amazing. The different dynamics and the familial relationships. I do think that the pacing dragged a little bit in the middle, but even when that happened, I was still invested the entire way through. There are two major time skips, the 15 years and the 9 years, which does kind of mess with pacing, but I also think they're necessary. And in order for Casati to cover all of that, it would have been really hard for her to not have time jumps. And then one thing that just kind of surprised me, I noticed that in Clytemnestra's brothers' relationships, that Casati actually switched the wives. It did catch me off guard because it felt as though so much of the book stayed fairly true to the original myths. I don't know if that was intended. Perhaps that was something that she is planning to change before this is officially published. In the end though, my final rating for this was 4-star, a very high 4-star. I did consider giving it a 5-star, but after sitting on it for a little bit and doing my compile breakdown, I did have those few cons that went against my rating, but I highly recommend this book. I really enjoyed it, especially if you like 𝗖cie. I think this is a perfect comparison story. Look at a villainous female character and twist the entire narrative, particularly through a feminist lens, to showcase her in a much more sympathetic and fully explored light. All right, y'all, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!